two slides. My God. Should I? Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. This morning, many of you who must be attending this particular talk, maybe you are there at that stage in UPSC. And the fact that you are here today with me is maybe because, or should be because of that. In choosing UPSC, you have struck that note in your life which was going to change your course of life. Without getting into much of a discussion about whether the All India services, jobs in the government are still the important and powerful part of the discipline, powerful part of the society. I mean, that kind of a power which the All India services and the jobs in government, which must have yielded maybe a couple of decades ago. I mean, I am not getting into that discussion right now. But it has to be believed that once you have selected UPSC and this journey, you will have to give yourself totally to this particular thing. See, each of the students that decides to work on this particular field wants to finish at the top as the number one there. That's very much obvious. But it is possible only if you follow the rules of the game properly. Now here, repeating that performance, refining the performance on a continuous basis is something that forms the key role, that plays the key role here. For actually, in order to repeat the performance, or maybe in order to see to it that you get to that stage of success, the right spirit of learning is what is important. What we generally see is that students are busy collecting a lot of material, the videos, the material, the printed books, and all that stuff. All that becomes a minuscule. What I look at in the candidate is to actually mold the student with those kind of right attributes that he should have, irrespective of the subject that we actually teach to the student. What we look for is that kind of a right attitude towards the exam as a whole and towards the discipline that he's learning in particular, that makes him qualified to get into this particular field. So it is not simply sufficient to think that you should be the one at the top. But what you should be looking for and what we try to give to you is the right attitude that is necessary for this particular exam. See, in today's discussion, I will not be spending much of time talking about why we should be taking anthropology as an optional subject. See, the fact that you are listening to this particular talk itself shows that maybe somewhere down the line, either you have zeroed down on this particular subject, or maybe you have decided that you will go about with this particular subject. Nevertheless, I would want to point out here that, you see, in UPSC, when about 25 different subjects are given as the optional subjects from where you can actually choose one, it means that UPSC is actually giving a provision to the students, to the candidates from different walks of life, from different backgrounds, so that they can choose something which might be close to their personality, close to their subject of study. So no single subject can be or should be downsized or looked down upon. It all depends on the chemistry that has to be established between the student and the subject. So irrespective of the subject, generally people come up with the different kinds of questions, especially when it comes to the non-technical subjects, or if at all I can call them social sciences subjects. Because we must have seen that in most of the cases, in many of the cases, if not most, in many of the cases, students coming from, maybe even the technical background, they might be looking at the non-technical and non-social, non-life sciences kind of subjects. So, people might be talking about maybe who can take, say, anthropology, who can take sociology, who can take political science, or who can take history, blah, 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 kind of things. So everything boils down to based on the nature of that discipline and to what extent you can actually relate yourself to that particular subject. Based on that, we generally suggest to the student to take one particular subject. So I'm not here trying to downsize some other subject and try to say that, hail anthropology, kind of. And then there are several other things, several other basic questions which people ask about all those subjects. In the last couple of years, I have uploaded a huge lot of videos on the YouTube channel Sosin classes, where you can actually visit and see and try to get some information about the what and how of this particular subject. Nevertheless, here, when I was naming this, be ahead of others with anthropology, see, all those optional subjects which UPSC gives for the student are different, are like different cards that you play in the game. When I'm putting this as the subject matter of this particular workshop, be ahead of others with this subject, I want this subject to play an ace card's role in the game. Basically, I'm looking at training the student with those tools, those techniques that would make you score that higher level of numbers like 340 plus, etc. That's what is our objective. So if at all I'm taking you to that particular, in that particular direction, in this workshop, I have certain major questions, major things to talk about. I tried to generate a short list of them, which you can see on the slide there. So I would be starting with responding to the popular questions of the students. I'll be picking up certain questions. Generally, this is something like a Q&A session, which is taken up towards the end of the session in general. But then here I thought I would start with this. Some popular kind of questions I will pick up, and suppose you are only looking for answers to those popular questions and you really do not want to go into the other parts of the talk, maybe perhaps you can listen to that particular first segment and then get going. Don't trouble yourself and don't waste your time listening to the rest of the talk. And secondly, I'll be explaining the structure of the subject, and then maybe perhaps I'll also be giving you some inputs about what are the general study sources, where from I should be studying. That is one other popular question that people ask, and I already made one video on that. I would be giving a summary of it here. And then anthropology now. Now in the sense, really now. In the sense that the time where we are living right now in the time of pandemic. In fact, on this particular topic of COVID also, I had made a couple of videos, COVID and anthropology, especially from the point of view of UPSC. Those two videos, if at all you had not seen, go back and see. Those are actually made primarily considering our senior aspirants, the people who must have studied the subject earlier. If at all that becomes an imperative for you to upgrade and update your content. So those couple of videos actually help you in updating. In one of those videos, I had actually attached a PDF giving all those collection of the links from where you can actually extract a whole lot of stuff that is more contemporary in terms of you can use them as case studies or whatsoever. But as such, this particular workshop is majorly aiming at the new students who are actually having that kind of, with that bubbling enthusiasm, and then who are scouting to see what material to study, how to start, where to start from, and all that kind of. So, basically, I'm looking at those little fellows. For the senior people, I think those two videos can give a huge lot of information. Much more is there, but then kind of. So when I say anthropology now, I would want to throw some light on how the conventional subject of anthropology has to be now studied and how you should be, trying to reorient yourself in this particular context. And then you have the other one there. That is how, anthropology how at Sosin classes, meaning that we are actually showing there that in anthropology how we will be talking about in Sosin classes, how we are going to talk about this particular subject and how we are going to deal the subject of anthropology in Sosin classes. And lastly, of course, I will be talking about at what dates we will be starting the discipline of anthropology for the new students. So this is all the set of questions that we will actually be starting to talk about. Now, if we look at the popular questions are like, who can study this subject? Whether, suppose I come from maybe an altogether different discipline, like, something like an engineering I come from, a medical science I come from, ecology I studied, am I qualified, can I understand, kind of. And then how long to study, how many months or days I should be spending. I mean, these are the popular questions. And then where to begin to study this particular subject? Should I start with chapter 1 or from where, kind of. And then what are the basic books and when to start writing? Those are the very common questions that I come across. So maybe perhaps I will look at these questions to begin with. See, you may not be knowing them. Many of you may not be knowing them. And not all of them, all of the pictures were taken in black and white. Some of them were in color, but I took them in black and white. That actually gives that antique look to that screen out there. These are only a handful of people. I mean, those of you who must have studied anthropology earlier, you must be able to recognize them. For the others, they may be some XYZ people, or the souls that must have existed some time ago. Let me tell you, this is only a small bunch of thinkers, named ones, in the discipline of anthropology. I would not want to, load you in the introductory talk itself with, huge number of names and try to trouble you with that. But then, these are the handful of people who came from different other disciplines. See, one, the lady out there, because I love to start with the lady. The lady out there, she came from She came from psychology discipline, and there are quite a number of other people. You have the very first one out there. I'm not using the names very cautiously. The one out there, he comes from geography, and then somebody out there, right-hand side bottom, he comes from linguistic studies, and then the other person in the middle, he comes from history. So when I'm showing all this, it is to communicate that these are the scholars, these are the people who had given different theoretical approaches to the discipline of anthropology. They came from different cross-section of disciplines. Meaning that if you are coming up with this question, who can study, these people can tell us that anyone can study the discipline. Okay. So if you are a geographer, if you are an engineer, if you are a psychologist, if you are a historian, if you are this, if you are that, if you are that, for everybody, the discipline had actually offered a platform to come up with their ideas. So that's the reason why, if you look at the syllabus of the discipline, we see that it is so very diverse. And occasionally, for a newcomer, this diversity presents itself like, there is this unconnected nature in the discipline. But it is not truly so. We train you here in Sosin classes, especially when I'm talking about this particular discipline. Here we try to train you with the mechanisms of how exactly to bring together all these diverse kind of disciplines into one unique commonality, one unique way in which the discipline of anthropology tries to combine the things from maybe archaeology, maybe history, maybe from linguistics and kind of. So anybody who can understand the basic cultural aspects, basic sociological aspects, and you have a flair for understanding the other people, a flair for understanding your neighbor, a flair for understanding people from other cultures, other religions, and then you have an inquisitiveness of understanding your own people. If you are somebody of that kind, you can venture into this particular subject. See, above anything else, what we look for is that 340 plus. And then as I was trying to show to you here, that's what you would want to be. That's what you would want to be. That red ribbon should be broken with your chest. That's what you look for. But then in order to go there, with any subject you can go there, not simply, you need not have to take anthropology alone. But if you are taking anthropology, why you are taking anthropology, that has to be very clearly in mind. 340 is fine, but to get to that 340, and then to get to that more than 50% in the overall marks in the UPSC main examination, you'll have to give yourself in the right spirit. That spirit is something that you'll have to get. That is going to be the focus. Now, taking you here, looking into these popular questions and who can study. Now I have settled this with you. Irrespective of your background, you can actually come from any background, but then you can learn. As far as that is clear. I mean, this was something that I was looking at with a lot of curiosity in the last couple of days. That's a young girl from India. She had, at the age of 19, she is in MIT. She is doing her, a double master's there, combining biology and anthropology in the contemporary times of global pandemic. She is actually trying to work in combination. This is, I was actually trying to write to her to invite her to, invite in the sense that on a kind of live session. I am trying to talk to her, trying to write to her. I think in a couple of days, I'll be starting to send my request to her and then kind of. So this is a very unique combination out there, bringing anthropology and biology. And look at the age at which she actually says on the right-hand side, if you observe, she says that she aims to be a physical anthropologist. I mean, things are so very clear at that age in the field of anthropology. And just imagine, most of you sitting in the UPSC class, you must have struck to anthropology. Anthropology must have struck you once you started scouting at various optional subjects. And one of your seniors must have said that, okay, this is the subject that is easy, that is short, that is simple, and then easy to score. Out of everything else, what must have attracted is easy to score. I have my own reservations about the other things that they must have said to you. It is not a small subject. It is quite a bigger one that I have to admit to the student even before the student takes it. But then, yeah, it is simple to understand. But things have been not so very simple when it comes to the competition. You'll have to learn to write. So we will come to those questions also. Where to start studying the subject from? This is another kind of a question that is generally asked. Voice okay, ma? Voice okay? Yeah. I rarely do these live things. Generally we record and we do the editing and kind of stuff. So I'm pretty new to the live session, so I have so I hope the audiences have no problems out there. I hope you're all enjoying. Keep giving a thumbs up there in the comment section so that our team also knows that, okay, you are able to hear. We were having some kind of a voice problem with that setup. So, where to start studying from? It's your wish. You can start from any part of the syllabus. Meaning that you need not have to start from chapter 1 and move on to chapter 12 or so. There are certain places from where you may perhaps start. See, I still have to discuss the syllabus with you. I mean, in this particular class, I will also be discussing the syllabus because many of us might have taken the subject, but going through it in a detail and what to do with the syllabus kind of things. So when I say that you can start from whichever, I'll give you some options. The best way of starting to study any social science for that matter, and anthropology in particular, is to starting with the part of anthropological theory. This is one of the best ways. Or maybe perhaps you can begin with something called Evolutionary Anthropology. I will be I'll be explaining to you what it exactly means by evolutionary anthropology. You may perhaps also start with tribal Indian anthropology, or you may start with something like Indian society. When I'm saying this, you must be wondering, how come? Is it not like, we may be starting with something that is basic in the subject and then I'm graduating to the other ones? I generally, recommend to the students to either start with your own society studies, maybe Indian society, because that looks to be simple. You have to remember, the things that look simple need not be simple. The simple things are complex to understand. And if you're starting with the theory, that's the heart of the subject. That takes you to the core of the subject. That gives you the tools to understand how to approach various other things in the subject, especially in the current times of COVID and pandemic. I'm really enjoying this period, and don't get me wrong, enjoying this period with the kind of writings that are emerging. I'm not worried about the other subjects. When it comes to anthropology, things that have been learned, things that have been taught for the last several decades, they have taken a huge test. They have taken a huge beating, if I'm allowed to say. So in this context, it becomes so very vital to begin with anthropological theory. That is the reason why in the upcoming session from 17th of June, when we are going to start the session, we will be beginning with anthropology theory. I want my student to be very extremely strong in the core area of the discipline, that is anthropology theory, so that whichever topic you pick up in the discipline, you will be able to write in the spirit of anthropology. So that's where, I'll be taking several extracts in the upcoming course, thinking like an anthropologist, spirit of anthropology, the kind of books from where we will be picking up the kind of content. And we see the beautiful way in which the theoretical foundations are being shaken now. And the second one is evolutionary anthropology. When we say evolutionary anthropology, this is in terms of maybe biological evolution and sociological evolution. When we talk about biological evolution, within biological evolution, it can be the branches such as microbiological anthropology, or it may be fossil studies of man, coupled with a combination of things here, that is archaeological studies, archaeological anthropology. So I am trying to talk here about from where to start studying. Or it may be like, trying to study tribal anthropology of India, or starting to study of Indian society, caste and kind of things. You may perhaps altogether, have a different plan of yourself. But remember, from whichever part you are starting, you will definitely encounter the new terminology. So the student should have an absolute command over the concepts, the terminologies. I think this section is clear. You can start from anywhere. And mind it, sir, irrespective of whether questions are asked from the core of the discipline or not, direct questions may not be coming in a particular area from the core of the discipline, but then you'll have to have an absolute command on the core of the subject. That will help you to play with whatever questions that are being asked in the exam. And whenever something changes in the discipline, that's what is the order of the day. Whenever something changes in the subject, things are changing, as I've been constantly telling my students and the fellow teachers, that things are changing so swiftly in the discipline that you cannot keep them unnoticed. You cannot be pretentious and saying that, okay, fine, I'll go with my old stuff. No. If things are changing at the heart of the subject. So if the core you are mastering first, you can actually incorporate this change in the core in various subtopics that you are studying. I'm not trying to intimidate anybody here, intimidate the student. I'm trying to give you how to approach this particular subject. Now let me take you to the other side. Yeah, this is another tricky question. How long will it take to complete the subject? That's really a tricky one. There are different kinds of students, different kinds of strategies to study. Some are there who, this is the ideal thing that let me tell you. Students come up and ask me, before starting the classes, what to study, any kind of basic preparation I should do. I generally ask the students, no, don't do. Because most of the students come from non-anthropology background. So if at all you are starting with some kind of a feel, see, if at all it is not a UPSC thing, if it is not a UPSC thing, in general you are pursuing, due to your academic interest, if you're studying this subject, I would say that, okay, fine, you experiment. You can start with some field, try to read what is there and go back to the professors, discuss, and then that's how we do in the academic things. The student actually goes to the field, he tries to understand from the field, he looks at the literature, tries to get a mental picture, goes back to the professor, and then he discusses what he understood. Then the professor tells whether you have observed there, whether you have studied there, correct or incorrect. That's actually a proper academic field where we experiment. But here, when it comes to UPSC, we cannot experiment, not with your finances, not with your time, not with your whatever, commitments and all. So no time for experimenting. So if at all somebody wants to learn for this exam, I say you just walk in and you walk with the teacher constantly. In every step, walk with the teacher. See, whatever new subject that you try to learn, irrespective of which subject, whenever you are coming across a new subject, there is always some kind of a discontent in the mind, a confusion, a discontent. And then there is that discomfort. And those are the tricky days. The initial few days are the very tricky days. Just go with the teacher, walk with the teacher, and start thinking. Try to analyze, try to understand. If any concept is given, try to apply to various situations. Unless and until you apply to various situations, you really will not be in a position to appreciate, to go to the crux of the subject. So when you're walking into the class, see what the teacher is talking about. Go step by step. Don't try to have, resort to unlearning things, going by something that you should not do and then kind of. So, and if that is the kind of an approach, if you're going with the teacher on a daily basis, see, generally what we do is that is the last part of our talk, but then because that has come here, let me tell you, in a 6 months of time, we do the teaching, we do the writing, we do the testing, everything is bundled in that 6 months. So an ideal time for a UPSC student, if at all he is going with a mentor, with the teacher, should be about 180 days. If you do not want to go with the teacher, then maybe perhaps it might take about a year or so, kind of, you do your study, you do your research and kind of stuff. So it all depends on, but then mind it, sir, if at all you are a serious candidate, it shall not spill over that particular time. And on a regular basis, see, this is another question people actually ask in the list of questions out there if I'm taking. Yeah, look at the last one for that matter. When to start writing? Actually, how long it will take to study and when to start writing, these two are the questions that are very close to one another. It is not simply that I am studying the subject, I am understanding the subject. You are approaching that completion only when you are not simply starting to write, you are enjoying to write. So what I tell the student is, right from the day one, you start writing. Whatever little, see, if you are a senior student of mine and you are out of the curiosity of whatever must have been added in the subject, and for that reason, if you are listening to this talk, I must have said to you this, that if you are attempting an answer in the first week of your course, first week of your learning, and then the same question if you're trying to answer after maybe a couple of months, then there will be an altogether different level of maturity. You learn by the day, you change by the day in terms of knowledge, in terms of presentation. So unless otherwise you accommodate writing in your learning process, you cannot call it a complete completion of writing. There are the other questions. Let me first bring to you the basic structure of the subject. Then for UPSC, how to look at the subject. And then I will take you to the literature, the books, etc. And this is something like, see, I have come up with this kind of a structure here, not with any specific reason, because different thinkers, different writers have given different arrangement or different categorization of the discipline. So this is one such kind of a division that we see, like tribal anthropology, biological, sociocultural, linguistic, archaeological. And this is one kind of a categorization. So the varieties of categorizations there. And when it comes to UPSC, those are the broad divisions that I would want to follow for the upcoming batch. So I named it as anthropological theory, evolutionary anthropology, archaeological anthropology, familial and then Indian tribal anthropology, genetic and molecular anthropology, Indian society, applied anthropology, applied physical anthropology, etc., etc., etc. Now the following few minutes are going to be exclusively for the newcomers in the field who would want to know what is there in the syllabus. I really do not know if at all you were somebody who had selected this subject, chosen this subject for your optional by looking at any particular part of your syllabus. Nevertheless, there are few things that might be attractive. Say, for example, you come from medical science. For you, the topics of genetics might be of interest. If you come from history in your school and college, for you, archaeology must have been an interesting thing. And maybe perhaps if you are somebody who had come from, say, non-life sciences or a technical kind of a course, maybe topics of marriage must have attracted you. Oh, we do not know. So let me just give you a broad look of the subject. You have two papers. If you look at the syllabus, you have 12 chapters out there. I am giving one word description of the syllabus. In one, you have a complete synopsis of the syllabus of anthropology, such as that chapter deals with the meaning of the subject. So what you learn in the subject that is going to be learned in the rest of the syllabus is actually presented there. And a lot of importance is given to evolutionary anthropology. A lot of syllabus importance is given to evolutionary anthropology. There's several other things, but this is very important. Meaning of the discipline, what you study, and then evolutionary anthropology. Coming to the second, and the meaning of evolutionary anthropology, I have already told you. That consists of maybe biological evolution, cultural evolution, etc. Second one talks about some of the basic concepts of culture. And this is a chapter that deals with the various social institutions, namely institutions of marriage, family, etc. So this is the second one. Chapters from 3rd to 5th, they also deal with a different set of other social institutions, whether they are political, economic, religious. So this whole lot of it deals with some social institutions or the other. Then you have chapters 6 and 8. This is where we largely deal with anthropological theory. And then you have one that is left out in between, 7. This is called linguistic anthropology. So this is one segment, sir, in paper 1, one segment. Largely, this whole thing is placed, meaning chapters 1 to 8 are placed in what is called section 1 of the subject. I hope it is clear. Now, when it comes to the rest of them, so for the senior students, it might look to be slightly, boring, but for me, the newcomers are important. Now, 9 to 12. This is generally seen as the section 2. People name it as biological anthropology, but then now there are so many sub-branches in the biological anthropology. We call it applied physical anthropology, genetic and molecular anthropology. So when it comes to 9 has genetic and molecular anthropology, environmental or ecological anthropology, primarily, and then we have what is called racial studies. This in general, and we will be talking about these. I mean, when it comes to racial studies, once again, the race revisited. Anthropologists are now writing with the kind of things that are unfolding in the western part of the world, with the kind of differences that are coming up, the kind of violences that are emerging in Northern America, with the kind of race as the central theme. Now anthropologists in the continent and world over and Western Europe, they are starting to write on race revisited. So in the contemporary world, race once again is coming up with new concepts, new ways of looking at it. So when I say that anthropology now, this is one of the things. Similarly, when we talk about this particular topic here in the ecological anthropology, if at all you are having the syllabus document with you, you may look into this. Here we will be looking at adaptation. Now, in the new disease situation, all the kinds of adaptation studies are actually being revised. Coming to the other ones. 10 generally deals with human growth studies. 11 deals with demography, primarily. Demography, mortality. This is going to be very, very significant topic in the next couple of years in UPSC, because mortality studies and demographic studies, the next census, of course, and then apart from the next census, the way the things have been unfolding on the mortality front in such a huge manner that may be altering the demographic character of the populations. And that's why it is going to be. And 12 largely is applied physical anthropology that I have mentioned towards the end of that picture there. So this is, in a nutshell, paper 1. Coming to your paper 2. The division is slightly different here. Chapter 1, once again, is evolutionary studies in Indian anthropology. Evolutionary studies in Indian anthropology with the focus on archaeology. And then 2 is demography. Three to five is the study of Indian society and how Indian society was studied. What is the grassroots Indian society? Village India. We will be looking at some of the questions in today's talk itself. And so this largely 1 to 5 is seen as section 1 in paper 2, and rest of them, like, from 6 to 9 are seen as section 1, section 2. Here we have very interesting concepts, tribal studies, changes in them. One of the interesting topics is globalization. So in the current times, how globalization has been affecting. So if the same question you were writing, let me show you this. This is one of the recent releases of us, a compilation of the syllabus and previous questions up to 2019. So that's the edition of 2020. In this 2019, this is the UPSC script actually. Look at that question that I have underlined, question 7A. Discuss how indigenous people encounter globalization. That was a 2019 question. Reasons for why that question was asked in that year were very different. The same question can be asked, maybe in the same terminology, in the upcoming main exam. But the answer will be totally different. Because globalization is not simply now challenged by indigenous people, but in general, the mainstream populations also. That was actually the topic of discussion there in paper 2. We have the other one, if you observe. Discuss in this slide the recent advances in molecular anthropology. It's so very scintillating, actually, 2020, coming up with several molecular anthropological studies. So topics like mutation, that was also there in 2019 paper, that is still relevant in today's times with a different answer. So questions may be the same. Somebody was asking the other day, a parent was asking this. It was said that about 250, 300 questions are there in the subject, and if at all we study them, that's it. Is it really true, madam? So I was telling him there that questions may be the same, but answers differ with the time when the question is being asked. So that you will have to be very cautious about. Because I have come to the papers, let me also show this. That is a question 4A that I have underlined that comes from this particular segment of the syllabus, especially chapter number 4. I read out for you. If at all you are seeing on the mobile, you may not be able to see the smaller line. So a given account of contributions of Iravati Kave and B.S. Guha to the analysis of race and caste in India. And interestingly, if you observe there, he had given a division, 10 marks for Karve, 10 marks for Guha, very clearly. So suppose you know only Karve, you are attempting for 10 marks, and kind of. And these were the questions that were highly expected. Because early March last year, 2019, in the National Conference of Indian Anthropology, Iravati Karve Memorial Lectures were released. And because such an event had happened, a question had to come, and it had come. So it's a very simple task to actually guess the questions. And of course, difficult also. If at all you're not following where the discipline is going, you may not be able to guess the questions. But once you are following those current affairs in the discipline, it becomes easy for one to actually guess the questions out there. So this is actually the syllabus, how it looks like. And people also ask books. Some people ask for collection of the books. Some people ask for studying the books. That's a small list which I have given in that collection of question papers, etc. I know, very tiny letters out there, but books are not so tiny. They are really huge. Let me do this for you. I will read out for you here. See, these are the standard books. But anytime the standard books alone are not sufficient. Because as the time changes, and I'm really worried about that, standard books do not remain standard. But then, yeah, we will have to. The very first one that I have written, Introduction to Anthropology, I will write down here because of the very small font out there. The very first book is Miller and Weiss. Very sought after book that gives you the traditional anthropology with giving a nutshell of it. We can call it a general anthropology book. All the major areas of global anthropology are covered there. And when I'm giving this list, I'm not going to talk about individual books out there. That was never my intention in today's talk. This list only communicates that one or two or three books alone will not be sufficient for a student to comprehensively prepare for this particular subject. And that's where is the difficulty. When you ask a question, how long it might take to prepare, may be difficult if you're going all by yourself, because such varied is the list. Added to this huge number of articles, journals that you'll have to keep referring to for writing a comprehensive answer. That is the reason why, I insist on writing. And all these books, many of them are indispensable. You cannot do away with one book on Indian society, one book on Indian archaeology. You really can't do away with them. They are a must. But even after having all of them, what is the challenge is whether one is able to get to the crux of the concepts. A proper understanding of the concept is important, and an application of it. That's where this matters. When I say anthropology, now you have to know what is the traditional meaning of the concept, how it had emerged, and what is the meaning of it. Globalization was something that we have seen here. I mean, randomly I picked up one example there. Or for that matter, let me bring you some interesting reference here. Look at this man, William Axon, the one who was actually studying the institution of marriage. You can browse his work. This was the one that was published 1st of April 2020. Association between marital transitions, onset of major depressive disorder in South Asian general population. In fact, his study had begun even before all these episodes were unfolding. He was trying to compare the Eastern societies with the American societies, and was actually trying to see whether there was a difference in the way divorce is considered in the Eastern societies compared to the West. And now in this particular article, after this, he concludes that divorce now is not taken so casually, so easily in the Western society. So divorce now in the West is approaching a standard of the Eastern societies. I mean, that's a very insightful thing that is supported by a lot of field study. And I'm quoting this particular study in the context of the topics such as marriage, kinship. So we come across kinship in the writings, where the importance of them and the way when you're mingling with the people, the kind of avoidances. If at all you're looking at your syllabus, say for example social anthropology, you're looking at the topic of kinship. You have kinship behavioral studies. Kinship behavioral studies are now having an altogether different dimension. So the avoidances in the kind of social gatherings, etc. So that becomes a very interesting area of study. The meaning is that every area that you're picking up now, we will have to accommodate the idea of concept, the idea of tradition, traditionally the meaning of the concept, and how the meaning and the application in the contemporary times is changing. I mean, this is only a small, something like a tip of the iceberg that I'm floating at you, but then every area for that matter seems to be. So that huge list of books, and then that's the big list of topics. People may be confused where to start from, where to go. Now, when you talk about where to, how to start, etc., when I'm starting to see you from the June 17th of 2020, our objective is to prepare you for that 2021 exam. Mostly we are meeting online because you know the things. People have been asking, when will be the offline? You know, and I know, everybody knows that the government has to say yes. In spite of that, people ask, these are the redundant questions. So they ask me, when can we have an offline course where we can sit in front of you and listen and then attack you with questions physically and all that stuff? I'm pleased to see those questions by a number of people, but not by the same person again and again. Everybody knows. So you'll have to have an understanding of which is a redundant question which has to be asked, etc. So right now we are doing online. Once the things are fine, we may shift to the offline thing. But these are all the new lectures with the new content, fully loaded with the documents that will be released as on that particular day. So this content will be, this course will be starting from June 17. We will be having somewhere between 90 to 100 classes there, including various other things that most of you people know, if at all you had consulted us. But see, this includes, my emphasis is on writing, whether in terms of assignments, whether in terms of tests. You see to it that, so I'm actually looking for the best rank to come up this year, that is, in the top 5. When I want one, I want the student to focus on writing. So this consists of 2 to 2.5 hours lectures and rigorous writing, and then writing both in terms of dictation, and in terms of the scripts that we are going to give to you, either as the slip tests or assignments or the full length tests, etc. This is something that you will have to be really serious about. So 17th of June we are going to start with your classes, your assignments, your tests, and of course the kind of revised books we will be providing and whatever. And on the portal you can keep asking questions, raising doubts and interacting. If you are in and around Hyderabad, then move around and come meet us for clarification of doubts. You can, with a prior notice, come over and get clarified your doubts, etc. Spend time with us and learn the things from much closer kind of proximity, maintaining the social distance, of course. So that's how things are. Many such talks we will be having in the near future, but as on today, I think that's where we are. And thank you very much for seeing this. And of course, if at all you haven't subscribed, I mean, this is how I learned these days. Subscribe to our channel and like or comment. Dislike also, that's also very important. Dislikes are very important for me rather than likes. So that's where, thank you so very much, young fellows. Looking forward to see you online. Have a great time.